Had a big head, rounded ears, 6 feet in the body maybe, with a very, very long tail, very muscular build. As it was walking, it was still looking at me, and that's when I really panicked.
It looked at me and thought, oh, there's a human there, I'm not scared. You say, well, I've seen this big cat, and some people just flatly refuse. They think that Britain's such a sweet little island, we shouldn't have predators that size.
I heard this growl behind me, nothing like a dog's growl, and just like anything else in life, you're sat on your own there. I don't care who you are, how brave you are, something like that will put the shivers up your spine.
As she was walking, before the cub came out, she flicked this tail. She literally flicked it in the air. And I simply could not believe what I was seeing. It was the most extraordinary feeling.
It threw its head back, he said, and it made this sort of round.
But when you actually realise that there are big cats living in Britain, it changes everything.
Welcome to Big Cat Conversations. We speak directly to people who've encountered one of Britain's big cats. We also discuss the bigger picture. Why are unofficial big cats being seen, and could these cats even be naturalising without us knowing? If you've had a big cat encounter in Britain and would like to discuss it, email me at rick@bigcatconversations.com. You can find other episodes on the website bigcatconversations.com. I'm Rick Minter, and thanks for joining me. Hello and welcome to episode 1. Right at the outset of the podcast series, I'm going to make a brief introduction. Do we have our own big cats living secretly in the wilds of Britain? Well, the main purpose of these podcasts is simple. It's to hear directly from witnesses and for us, the audience, to learn what we can from all of these encounters. I regularly receive people's big cat sightings and hear about their experiences. So I thought it might be helpful to record some of these cases and discuss them on a podcast. Often we won't include people's full names when they come onto the show, and we'll keep the locations a bit vague, and I hope you can appreciate that's what most people prefer because they don't want their local land invaded or have lots of media attention. In this episode, I'll firstly talk to Di in Somerset and then John in Gloucestershire. They have both seen 2 cats together. I'm joined by our first guest, Di, who is based in South Somerset, and Di has had several encounters of big cats around the county, and she's going to explain one of the most remarkable cases that happened in 2013, not far from where she lives, in the local countryside. Di, I'm very grateful to you for joining us and being our first guest. Can you explain the first time that you saw this sight as you were walking your dog in 2013?
I was walking my dogs early one Sunday morning, and I had gone into this field that had been harvested, and I was sort of walking around the hedgerows looking at birds, etc. And I decided to alter my course, and I walked up the field. I stood there looking at the countryside, and I turned round and looked at the ridge of trees that was ahead of me, quite a distance. And the hillside fell away, and it was divided into 4 sections, 4 big fields. Field number 4 to my right went off into a sort of copse of trees. I didn't go over there, but sort of a copse of trees and much bigger than the other fields. And I noticed something black on the ground, and I sort of looked and thought, oh, a bale plastic, and didn't think too much, carried on up the hill, and I thought, well, why would he have bale plastic there in the summer? I stood there looking at it, and then I thought it might be an Aberdeen Angus calf. Turned and started to go up the hill some more, and then I thought, well, I didn't see any cattle in the field, so I started to walk across the field, and the animal started moving, and then I realised what it was. I was astonished. I stood there, my heart was beating like a drum, and I was actually quite emotional because, I could see exactly what it was with its movement, which is like no other animal. I actually rang my daughter up and said, I can't believe what I'm seeing. And she still continued in this slow movement. She flicked her tail up in the air, and then just this slow movement again across the field. I was just stunned then. A cub ran out from behind her. The cub, I say little cub, it was little compared with the big animal. I would say something of the size of a Staffy Bull Terrier. It was playing. It was like a Labrador puppy running and jumping and running up to its mum, and she was moving her head. Still, she kept on with her same walk. Well, I simply couldn't believe it. I was looking down at the ground and thinking, I can't believe what I'm seeing. Anyhow, I watched them for 6 minutes until they'd come all the way across the fields, and then they just disappeared into the hedge. Absolutely astonishing.
Di, you had your mobile phone with you, did you? Because you said you phoned your daughter.
Yes.
But what about a camera shot?
No, it was too distant. And the only reason, I suppose I could have taken a photograph, but it wouldn't have come out. I saw the animal so clearly because she was silhouetted against the hillside. The hillside, they'd had sheep in there, and it was completely, grazed, and the grass was low. So I had got a perfect silhouette. And also for 2 days, I went up there at the same time, and in field 2, there was a man that I've met often on my walks with 2 male retrievers, and he was walking diagonally across the field, and these dogs were small compared with what I'd seen. As I say, I really couldn't believe what I'd seen. I left it a day or so, and I put it up on Google Maps, and then I went to see the farmer who I thought owned the field, and when I told them, they weren't at all surprised. He had seen it over a period of years, quite a few times, not, every month or anything like that, but maybe once or twice a year, and he'd seen it quite close too. It had taken some of his sheep over the years, and he did find a carcass in the tree, which surprised him somewhat, but I think it would us all.
Now, you deliberately didn't tell him about the cub, is that right? Because you
Yes.
felt it was too sensitive,
No,
is that right?
I didn't, because I'm very interested in this subject, and I don't want these animals culled, really. But he did say to me, when he told me about the sheep that had gone missing over a while, he said, well, quite honestly, I don't mind so much to lose a sheep because they also take the fox and the badger and a lot of rabbit. So when that animal's about, they don't have the other problems.
So he was tolerant?
Yes, I would think so. If it started taking too many, I don't think he would. But sometimes people say things and they don't always tell you what they're thinking. But he wasn't at all excited about what I'd seen.
Very interesting. And do you think you were watching a black leopard?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And she was big. She really was very big, because a little while ago I went over there and there was a patch. I thought it was nettles or something, but in fact it's a sort of indent in the ground. Why, I don't know. And I saw her walk over the top of it, and I don't know, I didn't take a tape with me, but I did pace it out, and I would say about 5 feet. She must have been about 5 feet long, and this enormous long tail.
Any other description you could, I know it was at a distance, but any other key descriptions about her?
No, just an intense black, which it's a very unusual thing in the countryside to see that intense black.
Against the green?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
Yeah. How long were you watching her before you noticed the cub?
I suppose about 3 minutes. And I wondered when she was, the black was stationary, whether she was feeding the cub.
Oh, okay.
I
Without
don't
you
know.
realising it at that point?
Yeah, because I didn't know why it was just lying there, It was just stationary. And that's when I thought Aberdeen Angus calf. But then there were no other cattle in the field, and a mother cow doesn't go too far from her baby. So, but it is this intense black, which, when you're looking in the countryside, you just don't see that black except baler plastic.
And I think you have looked at pictures of black leopard cubs and similar medium, large size cats, cubs, and you reckon it was about 2 months old?
I'm not sure how big leopard cubs are when they're born, whether they are lab retriever size, I don't know. But this was certainly very thick set and chunky. The only thing I can say is like a Staffordshire Bull Terrier, really, but smaller.
Did you see her tail at all very well?
Yes, I did. As she was walking before the cub came out, she flicked this tail, and she literally flicked it in the air, and it sort of fell back down to the ground. And I was standing there, and I simply could not believe what I was seeing. It was the most extraordinary feeling, and I actually felt quite emotional, because you think this is such a rare thing for people to see.
And it's very rare to see cubs. I've had a few reports from people, and the consistent factor I've heard is that people have described them as sort of half cat and half teddy bear type in appearance. Two of the people have actually used the word teddy bear. Yeah. Is that what you can identify with?
It was quite a long way away, but it did appear to be very woolly. And yes, I think teddy bear's quite a good description.
And that part of the countryside is not particularly wild and well covered with scrub and woodland, is it, I gather?
It is agricultural land. If you go to the west of that area, there is an area of wooded land. And I think this animal probably knew where she was going.
Intriguingly, Radio 4 did a feature on leopards for half an hour in 2017, and this description and your experience was part of that programme on leopards. So we can't compete with the status of Radio 4, but we can go into a bit more detail in these programmes. So thank you for that. And we're now going to move on to the rest of the family, as it were, because you and your husband have had other sightings, which some people are going to think, gosh, it's difficult enough to see one, and to have several, is this sort of plausible? But your husband's main best sighting of a big black one crossing the road is at an area in the Cotswolds near Andoversford, just to the east of Cheltenham. And I happen to know 4 other people who've seen one crossing the road in exactly the same spot, all independent witnesses, and 2 of them were 2 police officers. So it's interesting when you get this coincidence of and consistent reporting in the same area from people who've not met each other, not swapped notes, but are reporting the same thing. But interestingly, your husband doesn't have the slightest bit of interest in the topic, which I think is perhaps helpful. My other half is the same, and it keeps you a bit grounded, it stops you getting carried away, doesn't it? You've become attuned to it because of your sort of several lesser sightings, haven't you? But how do you become attuned to sort of noticing big cats then?
One day, I was letting my dogs out. We lived in the country. We had field 2 sides of our house. And I let my dogs out. My one dog wouldn't leave the back garden, and my other one, we went out into the lane by our house. All of a sudden, she went scooting back, and I put the torch up expecting to see a badger, actually, and this was in January. I put the torch up, and to my total horror, I saw 2 huge yellow eyes that went into crouching position. Yes, I did go in quite quickly. We went straight out with 2 big beam torches and nothing. And then I started to be interested then, aware. I'm not frightened, but I'm just very aware. When I'm out, I love the countryside, and I like looking at all aspects of nature, but I am looking now for this intense black.
I know you speak to various sort of dog walkers and farmers when you know them to talk to. One particular farmer has had several reports on his land.
My husband had seen it actually one lunchtime. It was going across the field and unmistakable. And my husband's a very calm person, and he just said, we've seen the cat, let's go up and tell someone who lives further up than us. I left it about 2 hours, I think, and then I went round to see the farmer whose land this animal had gone across and pretty close to his farm buildings. And he just laughed. And, I looked at him and I said, am I laughing? And he said, no. He said, you're not really serious, are you? And I said, yeah, I am. I said, you just have to be not frightened, but be aware. He's got dairy, and he would be up with cows calving and maybe problems. And of course, you've got the afterbirth. They will smell that. And incidentally, he never clears up afterbirths, which I smiled at him. And I said, what do you think has that? And he just looked at me, and I thought, well, there you go.
Yeah, it's a very rich source of food, isn't
it?
Yes, yeah.
He's an extremely nice man, and he lets me go on his land. But I've never seen anything down there, but I know absolutely 100% it goes across his land. I know someone else that has seen a cat on his land, probably half a mile away, and it goes across into his field down diagonally from his property. But when you're on tractor, you're looking at what you're doing, not looking, unless it crosses his field of vision, he's, not going to notice. But he and his son, they do look now. A lot of people are frightened of ridicule when they say they've seen these things, and I'm not now, but people do sort of roll their eyes, but I'm not bothered.
You are personally cautious and wary yourself when you're dog walking, when you think the cat might be around?
Oh, definitely.
You're not complacent at all, are you?
No, I'm not. It was Christmas Day 2017. I went up in the car to this particular walk, and my dog was clearly terrified, and I actually do think that the cat was very close, because she just ran back to the car, followed by me. I walked backwards for a little while and looking round me, and I went straight back to the car, and I'd hardly got the boot lid up, and she whacked her head trying to get in, and she was crouching down. I have no idea what that was about, but I didn't like it that day. But saying that, I go out every day, and it's not stopping me doing what I want to do, but I am just aware. Back in the winter, someone contacted me. He's very much a country man. It was a frosty morning. He saw these massive footprints crunched in the frosty grass. The field curved round, and then he saw what it was. And it was a very large black leopard. It saw him, and it just jumped straight over the hedge effortlessly. And he's quite a small man, and he did go up and have a look. And he reckons that the hedge was a good 5 feet. Unfortunately, he couldn't see over to see it going away. But I said to him, were you worried? And he said, no, because it went. So I just thought, yes. Interestingly enough, his dog did stand, but it wasn't frightened at all, but it did stand still.
So it noticed it?
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Di. And the final point to you is your emotional feeling about big cats being about in the countryside. How do you personally feel about big cats being around in the countryside?
As long as there is no problems with human beings, I don't like the thought of farmers losing their stock, but let them be, really. That is the last thing. I don't want them culled at all. But if you're a farmer and they're coming onto your land, taking quite a lot of your stock, I think that's a very different thing. And nobody can afford to have someone helping themselves. But I have seen footprints, and I have seen the scrapes on the ground, and I have seen scraping on a tree, which was quite amazing. And that started at 6'1" above my head. The first measurement of the nail mark was 6'1", so something has got to be very big to do that.
You actually quite enjoy being alert to those signs. It sort of adds interest to your walks, doesn't it?
Yes, I love it. And if I've found something, I'm highly excited.
And what do you feel? I know that you sort of keep in contact with other dog walkers and other local people, and you're involved in various sort of organisations. What do you feel about the awareness of big cats in the area? Does it just vary depending on people's sort of outlook and people's experience?
Most people say, no, I haven't seen anything, but I've heard. I've heard there's this and I've heard there's that. There is one farmer and his wife, and he had a very close encounter. Someone rang him and said, oh, some of your steers have broken onto my field, and my field isn't stock proof, so you better go up and move them quick before they sort of get out on the road. So he got in his van and shot up there, and this was Dimpsey. Dimpsey in Somerset is twilight. And he said to me, he's very local farmer, and he said, oh, I'm very calm with my animals. I don't go in waving sticks. I just go and move them and quietly. Well, this field was very rough, and he walked up the side of the field. He got to the top, saw where they were. They were just grazing. I think there were half a dozen. And when he came over the next sort of uneven bit, he was greeted by this magnificent black leopard standing there looking at him, and he said, it's one of those moments when all the hairs stand up on the back of your neck. So he said, you know what I said about being very calm with my animals? He said, well, I wasn't. The cat, apparently, he stood there and the cat ran away back into the trees. He said he ran over the field and yelled and bawled, and the cattle went down the hill back through the gap in the hedge. He filled it all up, and when he went in, apparently his wife said to him, what's the matter with you? And he said, you must never tell anybody this. And she thought, what is he going to say to me? So he told her the story, and he hasn't even told his son. And I was the only person he'd ever spoken to about it, which is extraordinary.
When I'm doing the big cat stands at rural shows, people will come in and say, I've never told anybody this, but this seems the right situation to confide.
Yeah. His wife also saw it about 6 months later. She was on their land going up a wooded track with these two little grandchildren who were, 7 and 8 or something, and she saw the plastic, and thought, who's put that there? And then it moved, and then she realised it wasn't plastic, and she grabbed hold of the grandchildren, and they stood there. The animal went off into the hedge, and so I said to her, I bet you went down the hill a bit quick. And she said, no, she said, I continued on the walk. And I said, oh, right. And she said, no, it had gone. I was a bit shocked, but no, I think people seem to just take it in their stride here. But neither of them have ever told anybody before.
Yeah, that's how it goes. It's many people only tell their close friends or family, if at all. Thank you very much, Di. Really appreciate you being our first guest on Big Cat Conversations. In this brief interval, it's time for our first Word of the Week on the podcast series. Now, Di queued us up nicely by mentioning the Somerset term for twilight, which is Dimpsey. Well, our Word of the Week this week is the Latin word for twilight, which is crepuscule, or in English, as we use the term, crepuscular. That means animals that are more active at twilight or dawn and dusk. And animals that are more active in the day are diurnal, and animals that are predominantly active in darkness are nocturnal, of course. Now, why is crepuscular more important for big cats? Well, that's because a great many sightings, a good proportion of reports come at dawn and dusk. They may be the first dog walker in the morning, the last dog walker at night, and big cats will be more active in twilight times because their main source of prey is more active at that time, the deer in Britain. And of course, big cats have lantern-like retinas in their eyes, which gives them the upper hand at that time of day to stalk their prey. Indeed, this links us to our next guest, who had his encounter at 10 to 6 in the morning. OK, well, our next guest is John from Dursley, and that's a market town in mid-south Gloucestershire. We're out on location, actually. Many of the podcast interviews are on the phone or inside, but we thought we'd come to the spot where John had his encounter. And it was autumn 2014. So if you can hear some background noise like building site work and people walking past, we're out on location. It's summer afternoon in mid-July, so there will be some local noise. But that's partly to emphasise that we're on the edge of a market town, close to residential areas, close to a big school. And just to get your bearings, we are about 5 miles east of the River Severn, 5 miles east of Slimbridge, in fact. John had a close-up encounter which he'll talk us through, and it started when he was cycling to work at this very spot we're at. This is a little green corridor that runs at the edge of town. But John, so you were cycling in the morning to work, 10 to 6, and you saw a little moggy come out of the woodland.
The first thing I noticed, it was running up towards me, and it was just a little black and white domestic moggy, and I looked down at it thinking, that's poor little moggy. I've scared that. I've really scared that. Mm-hmm. And it wriggled under a fence. It really seemed quite frightened. I thought, quite poor little thing. And as I looked up, down the track I was cycling, about sort of 15 yards in front of me, there was 2 big pumas had come across the track, up from another track, and they were just crossing and stepping off my path onto the grass bank just down here, Rick. And they just seemed huge. I was just looking at them thinking, wow, they're just big, thick legs, big, long bodies, and they were just side by side, and I was just looking at them thinking, they're at least 4.5 feet, maybe a bit more long without the tail. They were just absolutely, the bodies of these things were immense, yeah.
Adult cats.
Yeah, really large.
Yeah. You were saying you first assumed that they were golden retrievers or something. Is that right?
Because
you weren't expecting pumas.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting pumas, but just the sheer bigness of them, it was just bigger than any dog. It was just the thickness of the legs, and I sort of thought, yeah, what's that? But it soon come to cat. Yeah, really quickly.
And you saw their tails, okay?
I didn't know. I think the tails probably just were hanging low down because I was just concentrating on looking across the 2 because they were side by side and just thinking they're immense, and the one behind looked a little bit longer than the other. But what took me was as they were stepping off the path there, and there is a street light, just a few yards away, and it was just that thickness of that leg as they stepped off, and that's what sort of stuck in my mind is these big, long,
And the little cat had definitely sensed them and was running away.
Yeah, because it ran towards me, and I was trying to think I've scared it, but it ran towards me, which was quite odd, yeah. And I think it had clocked them and legged it up my way, so...
Yeah. And you, although it was early dusk, presumably, the street lights along this sort of walkway, illuminated the view.
Oh, so yeah, they were well, yeah, it was well lit up, yeah. I mean, and I've got the lights on the bike, but... Yeah, the lighting's great, and so they just stepped across and come on up this bank here, and it was short grass then. As I cycled past where they'd crossed, I was looking back up at them, and they just come up to this edge of the trees line here and just sat there. I carried on down a little bit further, and I was probably not even 70 yards away, and I stopped. I thought, I'm going to have a good look at these cats, and sort of, they were facing sort of 45 degrees away from me, and just sat there, and I shone my torch up off the bike, so I've got like a little zoomable one, and I could see the white underside of their bellies, and they just didn't look at me. They just carried on looking sideways on, and I shouted at them like, "What are you?" at the top of my voice, and they didn't look towards me or anything. And I thought, right, I wanted to see them get up and move sort of again, and just to watch them. And I just shouted at the top of my voice, "Get out of it!" and really shouted, and they just didn't look at me. And then I had this sudden feeling of dread, sort of seeing, there are two big cats there, and they're not intimidated. They're not even acknowledging me. Yeah, quite a strange thing. And I just got back on my bike and went on down the path there.
And you were telling me you had your phone, which has got a camera on it, in your backpack.
Oh yeah. But
you didn't think to get that out?
Didn't. No. I mean, as soon as I got to work, actually, someone said, "I've just seen two cats, and did you take a photo?" And it didn't even cross my mind. Yeah, it didn't. I just was looking at them, thinking, "Wow, that is just these are big cats." Yeah.
Having said that, to get it out of your rucksack from the backpack would have taken 30 seconds or so.
Oh, at least, yeah, to get it out and then up into camera mode. Yeah, I mean, at that time I wasn't going around anymore. So
what was your overriding emotion, John? Were you scared in the end of the situation?
Yeah, I mean, although they weren't threatening, they didn't even acknowledge me. The feeling of these two big cats, the possibility but they just totally ignored me. And after that experience, I rode down this track twice in 3 months because it shook me up that much that I had to get my head round this fear and just conquer it. Because as a lad, I'd walk anywhere in the countryside. It never ever entered my mind that there was anything like this. And talking to Frank and you, and Frank was saying, they didn't even acknowledge you. They weren't bothered by you, and they weren't threatening. And it took me a while still, but now I ride down here every day. I go to work really, virtually every day. So and I even stop at the place I seen them and look down the track to see where they come up from and if there's anything about. And these last 3 years, odd nothing since, but every day I do think of it. I think, I'm just going to stop and have a look. Yeah.
What do you think they were doing, John?
I don't know if it was a mating. I'd like to think it was two couples together mating, and that's my thought, because they didn't seem bothered by me or anything. It was almost like I was an inconvenience, and they just sat there waiting for me to go. So I don't. It could have been a mother and a large cub, a male cub, but they were big, fully grown. So. My thought is that I'd like to think that they were a mating couple, because
they've been with each other for about a week or so when
since when I've read up well on them, and they're together for a week, so it's a rare thing, but it's
Any other description on any markings? No blotchy spots?
No, I couldn't really notice that. Not when I was riding
when they're
down.
Younger.
Yeah, no, definitely no side markings of any spots, and as I was riding, they just looked smooth, very. Job to tell under the light what colour it was. They were either grey or light tan brown. I don't, but they were light. They weren't a black panther like a lot of people see. So it was very different.
Do you think you could have done anything to have made the situation a bit hairy if you'd have reacted a different way?
If I'd have then decided to approach them when I didn't scare them, they may have just got up and left. I don't know, but I certainly wasn't willing to. I mean, I stopped, like I said, a bit further on down the track and looking up at them. But after their non-acknowledgement of me, I wouldn't have wanted to approach them because I already knew in my head what they were. And it was enough just to stop the brakes and think, I'm going to have a look at this.
Presumably some of your colleagues noticed you were a bit shaken up, didn't they? But I know you're saying some of them didn't believe you, is that right?
Yeah, quite a few didn't believe. Quite a few take the mick still now, if I'm reading a magazine, they'll say, "Is that Big Cat Weekly you're reading?" and things, and have a laugh. And I'm quite willing to let them have a laugh about it. There's no harm. So, but there's a few that are open-minded about it, and quite a few that still, wouldn't have anything. And I'm not sure whether that's out of fear in themselves that there's a cat out there because they don't accept it. I don't know.
Bit of
But some of them-
denialism.
Yeah, bit of denial is if it's not there. If I say it isn't, I don't know. But it's different categories. Some quite open-minded, and some are just adamant they're not.
Yeah. Would you like to see them again in the right circumstances?
Yeah, I would love to. I really would, preferably through binoculars would be a lot nicer. Just studying them from a field away would be great. Yeah, I would really love to. But up close, maybe sat in the car up close might be all right if one crossed the road, but I'd feel pretty safe then. But
and you've done a lot of reading and research and thinking about pumas since, haven't you?
Oh yeah, definitely. I do a lot of. I've got probably about 15 cameras, the camera traps out around the local woodlands and places. And I'm always out walking the dogs, looking for any sign of anything, a bit of scat or a scratch on a tree or a footprint in the mud. Always. In fact, I wouldn't say a day goes by when I don't think about cats now, really. It's sort of that hooked on seeing them again, like you said, even if it's a picture on me in my camera to say that's it. But it's really captured me as just want to find out more about them.
Yes, and that's not because you want to prove their existence to people necessarily, if I've got this right. It's more that you're just being curious, and it's
I'm just curious. I wouldn't. I don't think I'd go to the Sun newspaper or something and say, "Hey, look, I've got a photo." I think that would do more harm than good. I think they're from everywhere around the UK. It's apparently there's been no incidents of cats harming anyone, so I really wouldn't want to put them in danger of putting it out there and getting some people that might want to harm them.
Yeah. It strikes me where we are, sort of 10 metres from this walkway. It's pretty similar to what you would get in California and Oregon and other sort of western states of America, where cougars, mountain lions, pumas, it's the same cat, are resident and native, and they can spend much of the day lying up, resting close to walkways where people are cycling past and toddlers are running past with their parents, but they're just resting up, and the radio collared data shows that cats can be there, not bothered by humans and not bothering humans. And we're standing by a sort of dense copse by the walkway, and it's a belting hot day, and any animal wanting shade and cover would just go into this copse and retreat there and sleep and rest, I guess. So maybe we have got a sort of replica situation here to where their native lands are. Yeah,
I mean, well, there's I ride down here every day, and I see deer and fox, badger, even the odd rabbit sometimes. So there's plenty, and squirrel. So there's, in fact, I'd say in this little greenland area, there's probably more wildlife than in a lot of the countryside. It's a very secluded little place, but it seems to have a lot of wildlife.
It's a classic green corridor sort of thing, wildlife corridor. Yeah. You've partly covered it, John, but your thoughts about big cats being in the wild in Britain and sort of possibly naturalising, what's your personal view on that, about good, bad, indifferent, and the issues that presents?
I think people would, if they really knew they existed, fear would take in a lot, and they would probably persecute them like they do in a lot of countries. And I think, to me, they haven't harmed anyone, and they're great for the ecosystem from what I've been researching. Fantastic creatures to have about, but the fear factor could cause, and so that would, people would have to be educated a lot better on big cats. But I'd love them to be here as a recognised species and left alone. I think they're fantastic, and it puts you on that edge, which is, it's not always a pleasant feeling. Sometimes when I'm out in the woods in the middle of my own, I think there could be a cat, but I don't think there's anything wrong with that, having a bit of fear, because I think it's good, a bit of humility, or that feeling that you aren't the king of the jungle, and it puts you in your place a little bit, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that, really.
Yeah.
I'm out with the dogs, walking the dogs, and that's every day, really, and I'm always looking for signs and mixing up areas, so I cover different places, always on the lookout. So, it's a lot of my free time, is taken up by it. And even just thinking about where would be a good location to put a camera and doing a bit of research and Google Earthing and thinking that could be a good spot. So,
And you've got quite a bias towards pumas. I mean,
yeah, I have. Yeah, I
is...
really have, because far more sightings of black panthers, but because of what I've seen, it drew me more to the unusual cat, and I just love to see it again. Really, yeah. And sort of proved to other people, but yeah, not through newspapers. Say, look, this is the cat I've seen. You know, and just have it. Probably just have it on my wall in my house, and that's the only picture that's going to be up anywhere. But yeah, it would be great.
Yeah, very good. And you reckon that they were such a similar size? Because we've been trying to say, come on, John, was it a mother and older youngster, or was it two older daughters or something?
When I looked at the time, 6 inches in it, I think there was probably, just 6 inches, but one was definitely slightly bigger than the other. So
Did one seem more dominant in its behaviour than the other, or was it so difficult to tell in that situation?
They were pretty much side by side almost, the way pretty much level. And I was just looking over the one to the other one's shoulders, you know, and it just, it was just sizing them really and thinking they're massive.
Yeah. And of course, it is pretty rare to have a sighting of two together. I mean, most of the wildcat species are solitary, but of course, they're not always solitary in their lifestyles. They will cooperate sometimes, meet together, but the textbooks and a lot of the observations suggest that these cats are often solitary in their lifetime, and most witnesses only see one, but you're a rare witness that has seen two adults together.
Yeah, it's quite... Yeah, well, as you said, for a week they get together to mate, and probably a female every 18 months, 2 years. So, yeah, you're talking 100 weeks, 1 week of that they might be together. So, yeah, it's quite a rare... sort of quite a rare sighting, which is sort of amazing. But it's a lot of people have said to me, "You've seen two?"
yeah, there we are. Yeah, John, that's been wonderful to hear your experience, and it's so intriguing to hear the way it's influenced you, and that you want to learn more about it. So,
big
thanks.
Think I'll be continuing for many years. It's a very slow going progression, but it's just finding more out about them. It's quite hard work, but I totally enjoy it because it's not an instant gratification. It's a very slow process, but every bit of scat or print I find is just great reward. So it's but it can be months, 6 months between finding a trace of possibly a cat, and very, very slow, hard work, but it's
And it's good. I mean, you find it's good to be with a network of people who can swap notes and give you a judgment on whether that's worth sending to a lab or checking under a microscope or what you do next. It's constant detective work, isn't it?
It's great because you get the feedback from other people of what they think of a photo and their thoughts. Is it a dog or
I ought to say,
and just talk cat with people that totally go, I don't look at you as though you're an alien. So it's that's the great bit as well. It's just a straight talk cat with someone.
And swap notes with other witnesses, of course. But you've just reminded me that I would say, from what you've shown me on snippets of what you've got on your trail cameras today, you've got at least one video clip that is tantalising and that you think is a big cat, and it could be. It's not it's just too rapid, isn't it?
Yeah, the way it's sat there and the way it accelerates is you can see it turn its head from the eye shine into the camera, and then it runs, and it is so quick, and there is something else beyond that. And there's also a sound of something being killed, like a rabbit or a hare. So it's quite a clip. But I don't think it would get any skeptic to say, "Oh yeah, I can see what you mean." But just the way it behaved and the acceleration to a lot of the people in our sort of cat group they're all coming back saying, they think it's cat, and they're very harsh when they look at a video because.
We know we're biased, as it were, but we have to undo that bias.
We
and be
really
objective,
look at it objectively and think, the group know a lot about cats and their movements and the way they would accelerate fast and things like that, which a lot of people wouldn't. So,
And that's you must see that as encouraging, that you feel you've got a big cat on camera, good enough to sort of be influential, but, you can do it, as it were.
It's, it was a great sort of, that was only within probably the first 6 months, less than that, I think, that I got that first snip, and then nothing really for the next
Well,
2.5 years. So it's
You say that, John, but
Yeah.
you've got another blob, a still picture, which is a sort of big black blob. And
yeah.
that we're all interpreting it in different
Yeah,
ways, but some of us are
yeah.
interpreting it with a sort of protruding, big, thick tail.
Yeah,
And I'm one of those.
that's a
But we
very-
recognise, again, it's not going to influence
yeah,
anybody.
I
but-
think it's getting, but yeah, it's I've got that picture, and I got a print
Footprint,
in a mud,
yeah.
footprint in a
Mm.
mud, which is very, to me is just not dog. It's just there is dog surrounding that print, and that is not dog in the middle of it. Yeah, so
Yeah.
it's quite good. And scat find a few very large scats. So
Yeah, the quest continues.
yeah, it really does. It's good fun, really. It's when you're out walking a dog every day, you're multitasking. I always say
Yeah.
you're looking for the cat and walking the dog. So
Yeah, and keeping your mind alive.
yeah.
Yeah. Excellent. John, thank you so much for being one of our early guests on the podcast series. That's been a terrific start to these
It's
shows.
been a pleasure to talk cat.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you, John. Well, thanks everybody for listening. Remember that you can go to the website, which is bigcatconversations.com, if you want a bit of background info. And you can email me if you want to get in touch with any aspects of the show. Coming up in the next set of episodes, we're going to be in the southwest to go to Exmoor and look at the Exmoor beast. We're also going to go to Gloucestershire and talk to researchers and people who've had encounters there, Buckinghamshire and North Scotland. So we will be getting around the place. Thanks for listening, everybody, and see you next time.